Okay, let's unpack this. If I asked you what tool you use most often to build your life, what would you say?
Well, most people would probably say their education, right? Or maybe their professional network.
Yeah, or maybe your bank account. You probably wouldn't point to a tiny, invisible four-letter word that you use hundreds of times a day.
Right, because it's easy to overlook the scaffolding when you are just busy looking at the building.
Exactly.
We rely heavily on these structural words, but because they are so ubiquitous, they just become entirely invisible to us.
And that invisibility is exactly what we are stripping away today. So welcome to today's deep dive.
It's a really fascinating topic.
It is. Our source material for this exploration comes from excerpts of The Creative Power of Make, a guide to English usage.
Which is a great resource.
Really great. Specifically, the guide features a detailed conversation between two English teachers, Emma and Jack, and they are basically breaking down the mechanics of this word for language learners.
Yeah, they really get into the weeds with it.
They do. So our mission today is to act as your shortcut to understanding how this single chameleon-like verb, the word make, serves as the hidden structural foundation for just so many of our daily expressions.
It really is doing so much heavy lifting.
Right. We are going to track how this word evolves from physical creation to abstract conceptualization, and then finally into something completely involuntary.
Which is quite the journey for one little word.
It is. We use it constantly, but we rarely stop to realize how much psychological heavy lifting it is actually doing in our daily conversations.
Well, it is a phenomenal lens through which to view language. Words like make are just essential for beginners trying to navigate a new tongue.
Definitely.
The guide points out that learners desperately need it just to function. But, it is also manipulated every single day by native and advanced speakers to convey these really complex, subtle meanings.
Yeah, it's not just basic vocabulary.
Exactly. Our goal here isn't just to list vocabulary words or, recite grammar rules. We want to synthesize the patterns behind why we use make in these specific, sometimes contradictory ways.
Right, and explore what that tells us about how we construct our worldview.
Precisely.
So let's start at the absolute ground floor. The literal physical foundation.
The basics.
Yeah, the guide kicks things off with the most basic definition of the word, which is to create or produce something new.
Yes, the foundational meaning is rooted entirely in the physical, tangible world. It is the act of bringing something into existence that, simply was not there before you took action.
Right.
It is the shift from non-entity to entity.
And the examples provided in the guide are incredibly mundane, which is probably why the magic of the action gets lost on us.
Oh, absolutely.
Emma and Jack talk about baking a cake, so you make a cake. You write down some items on a piece of paper to remember them at a store. You make a list.
Or a factory.
Yeah. A company puts together metal and glass in a large facility. They make cars. Even just throwing together a sandwich for lunch, or, brewing a cup of tea, or crafting some beautiful jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time you do this, you are effectively acting as an inventor.
Well, let's pause there for a second.
Okay.
Inventor might imply a level of novel genius that, say, making a sandwich doesn't quite possess.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But you are undeniably a builder. What is fascinating here is how the verb effortlessly scales from the micro to the macro.
Oh, right. Like the sandwich versus the car.
Exactly. It applies to the person putting together a quick cup of tea in their kitchen just as perfectly as it applies to an entire industrial factory producing thousands of automobiles.
That's true.
The scale of the operation changes drastically, but the core semantic relationship between the creator and the creation remains identical.
Right, because before you stepped into that kitchen, there was just, some loose bread, some cheese, and maybe some turkey.
Just raw materials.
Exactly. You, as the speaker, as the actor, you actively brought a unified sandwich into the physical world that did not exist 2 minutes prior. You took those raw materials and manifested a new reality.
You did.
And the guide actually points out that this creation doesn't even have to be an object you can physically hold in your hand.
Right. The abstract creations.
Yes, and the teachers in the book prove this with a terrible joke that I am absolutely going to inflict on you right now.
Oh, no. I think I recall reading this in the source text.
You probably do. So one asks the other, why did the student eat his homework?
Uh-huh.
Because the teacher told him it was a piece of cake.
A truly profound piece of modern comedy.
Hey, come on, it perfectly illustrates the point. She made a joke.
That is true.
The joke didn't exist in the room before she opened her mouth and articulated it. She constructed it utilizing language as the raw material, just like the factory constructs the car using steel.
I appreciate the utility of the joke, regardless of its quality, because, well, it does synthesize the core point beautifully.
It really does.
Whether it is a 2-ton vehicle rolling off an assembly line, a cup of tea on a saucer, or a remarkably bad pun, the underlying concept is exactly the same.
Right.
Something new exists in the world entirely because of the subject's deliberate action. The universe is now fundamentally different, even in a microscopic way, because you acted upon it.
So that is our literal physical foundation. But this brings us to a really crucial conceptual leap.
Yes, the transition.
Because if making is fundamentally about bringing something new into existence, it logically follows that we use it not just for physical objects, but to construct the abstract paths we take in life.
This is a major thematic transition in the way language operates. We move from building physical things to building our futures.
Yeah, and the guide emphasizes this heavily for learners.
Yeah.
When we talk about our lives, we use make with decisions, with plans, and with choices. The teachers in the text, Emma and Jack, they talk about making a plan for the weekend, or specifically, making a plan to visit Italy for the summer.
Right, planning a trip.
They talk about needing to make a decision about a holiday, perhaps choosing Spain instead. They use the example of making a choice, like picking out a specific red dress.
Yes, those are the core examples.
And there is a very strict rule highlighted here. You never do a decision or do a plan. You have to make them.
Right, and it is one of those common hurdles for non-native speakers. Many other languages frame this concept entirely differently.
Really? Like how?
Well, in Spanish, for instance, you take a decision. Tomar una decisión.
Oh, fascinating.
In some other languages, you might give a choice. But English structurally demands this specific verb of creation.
Wait, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Why don't we say do a decision?
That's a good question.
Because I was thinking about this distinction between doing and making. My theory is that doing implies like merely carrying out a chore.
Ah, I see what you mean.
It's maintenance. Like
Yeah.
you do the laundry, you do the dishes.
Yeah.
You are just completing a pre-existing task that was already there waiting for you, trying to get things back to a baseline.
Right.
But making a decision implies you are actively building your future. You are taking raw options and forging a path that didn't exist before.
I wouldn't go quite so far as to say you were always forging a genuinely new path. I mean, often you were just picking between two pre-existing options.
Okay, fair.
But your point about maintenance versus creation is spot on. Doing is about managing the status quo.
Yeah, exactly.
Making implies forward momentum. When you use make for choices and plans, the language heavily emphasizes your personal agency.
Meaning you aren't just stumbling blindly into your summer plans to visit Italy or Spain.
Right.
You aren't just passively receiving a vacation. You are constructing that reality.
Exactly. And linguists often debate how much our grammar shapes our perception. It's a concept related to linguistic relativity.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah. So when the language forces you to say, I make a decision, it encourages you, the listener, to think critically about your own autonomy.
That makes total sense.
You evaluate the raw materials of your life, your time, your interests, your financial resources, and you build a plan. The English language structurally demands that you take ownership of that action by using the ultimate verb of creation. You are the author of the outcome.
But taking ownership of a weekend plan is easy. The real test of this linguistic agency is how it applies to our survival.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to what is arguably the most significant abstract path we construct in our adult lives, how we actually support ourselves.
The economic reality.
Yeah, it feels like a very natural evolution of the concept. We go from actively constructing our weekend plans to actively constructing our livelihoods.
Yes, the active construction of our future naturally leads to how we sustain our livelihood. This is the next major semantic category the guide covers, which is using make with money and living.
And the examples in the source text are very telling. They describe someone making a lot of money at a new job. They mention making a living as a painter or making enough money to travel the world. And when the two teachers in the guide discuss their own lives, they note that they make a living by talking every day and teaching English.
Which is a lovely practical application of the very language they are dissecting.
It really is. But the phrasing, making a living, That is what really caught my attention. It reminds me of alchemy.
Alchemy.
Yeah. You don't just find a living sitting under a rock waiting to be discovered. You don't do a living as a chore.
No, you certainly don't.
You have to generate it out of thin air using your raw skills.
Yeah.
Like if you are a painter, you are taking a blank canvas, some colored pigments, your imagination and your time, and you are literally generating a livelihood where there was nothing before.
It is the alchemy of human effort. I like that analogy.
Right?
Just as an industrial factory produces a physical car from steel and glass, a person produces economic value from their skills and labor.
It's fascinating because so many other languages frame income differently. Like you mentioned Spanish earlier, where you ganar money, which translates closer to winning or earning it.
Yes, and French is similar, using gagner. Earning or winning money implies a system of reward.
Oh, like a prize.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It sounds like you are receiving compensation for good behavior, or perhaps getting lucky in a system outside your control.
Wow.
But making a living frames the economic pursuit as a proactive, empowering endeavor. You are wrestling your survival into existence.
Making a living doing something you genuinely love, like the teachers in our source text, is framed by our language as the ultimate act of creation.
It really is.
You are building a sustainable ecosystem for yourself. You are the sole manufacturer of your economic reality.
And this deeply reflects a specific socioeconomic mindset embedded right into the vocabulary.
Oh, for sure.
English frames financial survival as an act of continuous, deliberate creation. It places the responsibility and the credit squarely on the shoulders of the individual.
Okay, so far this all feels incredibly empowering.
It does.
I am the inventor of my physical world when I make a sandwich. I am the author of my destiny when I make a plan to go to Italy. I am an economic alchemist when I make a living. I mean, I am the master of my domain.
Up until this point, yes, the narrative has been one of total proactive agency, but
The final use of the word that the guide explores flips this entire paradigm completely upside down.
it really does.
It is a total inversion. Suddenly, we aren't the ones acting as the creators. We aren't the ones building our reality. We are the raw materials being acted upon.
This is exactly where the grammar takes a sharp psycholinguistic turn.
The guide highlights a fascinating syntactic shift. When we talk about what causes a feeling inside us, we still use make, but the formula changes. The structure becomes make plus a person plus an adjective for feelings.
Right. The grammatical subject is no longer the human being. The subject is the external stimuli.
Right. So the examples from the text are, this music makes me happy, the sad movie made her cry.
Or that noise makes me angry.
Exactly. Or the good news made everyone excited. The teachers even talk about what makes them happy in their own lives.
Yes, I remember this part.
Emma says sunny mornings, good coffee, and teaching English make her happy. Jack says that hearing from a listener who says, I understand English better now, that makes his whole day.
Grammatically, this is doing something quite profound. It completely strips the human of agency.
Right. So what does this actually mean for how we process our emotions? Because the word has wildly shifted its function.
It has.
We just spent all this time establishing make as a tool of our own control. I take flour and sugar and I make a cake, but now it's this relentless force of nature. The sad movie made her cry.
Well, let's look at the mechanism here. It's less like a factory assembly line and more like a reflex hammer at the doctor's office.
Oh, a reflex hammer. I like that.
You don't build a knee-jerk reaction. The hammer strikes, and the physical response is entirely bypassed from your conscious control. The grammar treats our complex emotions exactly like reflexes triggered by the outside world. It is about involuntary causation.
Involuntary, meaning the language implies we just don't have a say in the matter.
Precisely. When Emma in the guide says the sunny morning makes her happy, she isn't deciding to actively construct a happy feeling the way she decided to actively construct a plan for Italy.
Right. She didn't sit down and draw up a blueprint for joy.
Exactly. It is not framed as a conscious choice. The subject, the movie, the noise, the sunny morning, forces the emotion into existence within the person.
That's wild.
The external force is the creator, and the human being is simply the blank canvas being painted upon.
I'm just the flour and sugar, and the sad movie is baking me into a state of tears.
That is the exact psychological defense mechanism the language provides. We eagerly use make to take credit for our physical creations and our financial successes.
Of course we do.
We want the agency there. But when it comes to our internal emotional state, the language offers us a syntactic escape hatch.
An escape hatch.
Yes. We place the power of creation squarely in the hands of the external stimulus. So I would pose this to you, the listener. When you say, a good cup of coffee makes me happy, are you really giving a hot bean beverage all the credit for creating your joy?
Right.
Or when you say, my boss makes me angry, are you absolving yourself of your own emotional regulation?
That is a staggering thing to realize. We use the exact same verb to confidently declare, I built this livelihood, and then defensively claim that loud noise built my anger.
It's quite a contrast.
We really have taken quite a conceptual journey here today just by unpacking one invisible word from a language guide.
It clearly highlights how complex and layered our everyday communication is. I mean, the words we consider basic vocabulary are often carrying the heaviest psychological loads.
They really are. Let's do a quick recount of the conceptual blueprint we just walked through, just to summarize.
Good idea.
We started on the ground floor with literal physical creation, baking cakes, producing cars, making tea. We established ourselves as the inventors, bringing tangible things into the world.
And then we transitioned into the abstract space. We looked at how using make to craft plans, choices, and decisions emphasizes our autonomy. We aren't just doing our lives as a form of maintenance, we're actively constructing our paths forward.
Yeah, and from there, we progressed to economic reality, making a living. We saw how English frames survival as the continuous alchemy of taking our raw skills and proactively generating wealth, setting us up as the sole creators of our livelihood.
And finally, we landed on the grand inversion, the involuntary creation of emotions.
The reflex hammer.
Right, how music makes us happy or noise makes us angry, the syntax shifts, and the power of creation is transferred from our own hands to the outside world, treating our feelings like involuntary reflexes.
It is an incredible amount of heavy lifting for 4 letters. So for you, the listener, your takeaway today is simple, but it does require a bit of active listening on your part. The next time you are speaking in a meeting or writing an email or just chatting with a friend, pay attention to this chameleon verb. Notice when you are acting as the creator in your own life, taking raw materials and forging a path.
It is a phenomenal exercise in mindfulness. Paying attention to your own structural language can reveal a tremendous amount about how you perceive your role, your agency, and your power in any given situation.
And that leads me to a final, slightly provocative thought for you to ponder, something that builds right on top of the psycholinguistics we've been discussing today.
I love a provocative thought.
If the word make is all about creating something new, and we rely on it to describe our involuntary emotional responses, like the news makes me angry or the movie makes me sad,
Right.
does the very language we speak make us feel less in control of our own feelings?
Wow. That gets right to the heart of linguistic relativity. Does the grammar reflect our reality or does it dictate it?
Exactly. Are we subconsciously wiring our brains through our own syntax to believe that our emotions are manufactured by outside forces rather than generated from within?
It's a powerful question.
If we say, I am angry versus that makes me angry, who holds the power in that sentence? Let that mull over in your mind. Think about how your grammar might actually be shaping your cognitive reality. Because the next time you look at the metaphorical skyscraper of your life, you might just realize that the foundational blueprint was written in the invisible words you use every single day.